So you're building a new PC or maybe upgrading your current setup and you need Windows 11 Pro. You go to Microsoft's official website and boom, they're asking for $199, $200 just to activate your operating system. That's enough to make anyone hesitate. You start thinking there's got to be a cheaper way, right? Well, you're not alone in that thought. If you've been browsing YouTube, Reddit, or any tech forum, you've probably seen people talking about getting Windows keys for $5, $10, maybe $30. Sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? And here's where things get complicated because the truth is, it's not black and white. Some of these cheap keys are legitimate, some are questionable, and some are straight up scams that could leave you worse off than where you started. Today, I'm going to break down everything you need to know about getting a Windows 11 Pro key without emptying your wallet. We're talking about the different types of licenses, where these cheap keys actually come from, the real risks involved, and most importantly, how to protect yourself from getting burned. By the end of this, you'll know exactly what you're dealing with and whether it's worth the risk for you. Let's start with the basics. Microsoft offers Windows 11 in different editions. There's Windows 11 Home, which is the standard version for most users, and Windows 11 Pro, which includes advanced features like BitLocker encryption, remote desktop, Hyper-V virtualization, and domain joining capabilities. If you're just gaming and browsing, Home is probably fine. But if you're doing any kind of professional work, running virtual machines, or need enhanced security features, Pro is what you want. Now, when it comes to licenses, Microsoft sells three main types, and understanding these is crucial to making sense of the cheap key market. First, there's the retail license. This is what you get when you buy Windows directly from Microsoft or an authorized retailer. The retail license costs $139 for Home and $199 for Pro. The big advantage here is flexibility. You can transfer this license to different computers over time as long as you only have it active on one machine at any given moment. If you upgrade your PC or build a new one, you just deactivate Windows on your old computer and reactivate it on your new one. Plus, you get direct support from Microsoft if anything goes wrong. Second is the OEM license, which stands for Original Equipment Manufacturer. This is the version that comes pre-installed on computers from Dell, HP, Lenovo, and other manufacturers. You can also buy OEM keys separately, usually at a lower price than retail. The catch? An OEM license is permanently tied to the first motherboard it's activated on. If you replace your motherboard or try to move the license to a different computer, Microsoft won't let you reactivate it. Technically, the license dies with that motherboard. Also, with OEM, Microsoft expects the computer manufacturer or system builder to provide support, not them. So if you install it yourself and run into problems, you're basically on your own. Third, there's volume licensing, also called VLK or KMS keys. These are designed exclusively for businesses, schools, and organizations that need to activate Windows on multiple computers. They work through a central activation server and are managed by IT departments. Here's the critical part. Volume licenses are not meant for individual consumers. They're supposed to be sold in bulk with a minimum of 5 licenses. And they come with strict terms about how they can be used. An individual buying a volume license key is violating Microsoft's terms of service. So where do all these cheap keys you see online actually come from? This is where we enter what's called the gray market. Now, the gray market isn't the same as the black market. Black market goods are outright stolen or counterfeit. Gray market goods are technically legitimate products, but they're being sold through unauthorized channels or in ways that violate the manufacturer's terms. Here's how it typically works. One common source is regional pricing differences. Microsoft charges different amounts for Windows in different countries. A Windows key that sells for $200 in the United States might only cost $50 in India or Russia. Some sellers buy keys in bulk from cheaper regions and resell them internationally for a profit. While the keys themselves are legitimate Microsoft products, reselling them this way violates Microsoft's regional licensing agreements. Microsoft can theoretically detect your location through your IP address and invalidate keys that are being used in the wrong region, though in practice, they don't always enforce this. Another source is surplus OEM keys. Computer manufacturers order Windows licenses in massive quantities. Sometimes they overestimate their needs and end up with leftover keys. Rather than let these go to waste, they might sell them off to wholesalers who then sell them online at a discount. These are genuine Microsoft keys that work perfectly fine. The question is whether reselling OEM keys this way violates the terms of the OEM agreement. Microsoft's position is that OEM keys should only be sold with new hardware, not separately, but the keys themselves will activate just fine. Then there are keys from the Microsoft Developer Network, or MSDN. Software developers and IT professionals can subscribe to MSDN and get access to various Microsoft products, including Windows keys for testing and development purposes. The terms explicitly state these keys are not for commercial use or resale, but some people ignore those terms and sell their MSDN keys online. Again, these are real Microsoft keys that will activate Windows, but using them violates the licensing agreement. The sketchiest source is misused volume license keys. Remember those organizational licenses I mentioned? Some gray market sellers get their hands on volume license keys and resell them to individual consumers. This is a clear violation of Microsoft's terms. The company can and does occasionally audit volume licenses and deactivate keys that are being used improperly. If you activate Windows with a volume key you bought online, it might work fine for months, but then one day, Microsoft's system could flag it, and your Windows installation gets deactivated without warning. And then, at the absolute bottom of the barrel, are outright fraudulent keys. These might be keys purchased with stolen credit cards, keys generated by software cracks, or completely fake keys that were never legitimate to begin with. These won't work at all, or if they do activate initially, they'll get blacklisted almost immediately. So here's the million-dollar question. Are cheap Windows keys legal? The answer is, it depends on where the key came from and how it's being used. Buying a legitimate OEM or retail key from a surplus reseller is not illegal. You're not breaking any laws by purchasing a discounted Windows key. However, you might be violating Microsoft's terms of service, which is a different matter. Violating terms of service isn't a crime, but it does mean Microsoft could deactivate your license if they detect it. Using a volume license key as an individual is a violation of the licensing terms. Microsoft explicitly prohibits the retail sale of volume licenses to consumers. If they discover you're using a volume key inappropriately, they can deactivate it. And buying keys that were obtained through fraud, like with stolen credit cards, could potentially implicate you in illegal activity. Though in practice, the buyer usually isn't held responsible if they weren't aware of the fraud. Now let's talk about the real risks you face when buying cheap Windows keys. Risk number one is that the key simply doesn't work. Some sellers are running outright scams. They take your money and either send you a completely bogus key or don't send you anything at all. If you paid with a credit card or PayPal, you can usually dispute the charge and get your money back. But if you used a payment method with no buyer protection, you're out of luck. Risk number two is that the key works initially but gets deactivated later. This is particularly common with volume license keys. You install Windows, everything seems fine, you use your computer for weeks or months with no issues. Then one day, you boot up and see a message that your Windows license is invalid. Microsoft's activation servers have flagged your key. Now you're back to square one, except you've already paid for a key that no longer works. Risk number three is limited or no support. If you buy from the gray market and run into activation problems, you're probably not going to get help from Microsoft. They'll see that your key wasn't purchased through an authorized channel and tell you to contact the seller. And good luck getting support from some anonymous seller on a marketplace website. Many of them have minimal customer service or disappear entirely after making their sales. Risk number four is security concerns. Some of the shadiest key sellers also distribute modified versions of Windows installation media. They'll send you a USB drive or download link that includes Windows along with your key. The problem is that installation media might be tampered with. It could include malware, spyware, or backdoors that compromise your system security. You should always download Windows directly from Microsoft's official website, never from a third-party key seller. Risk number five is getting your payment information stolen. Some gray market websites are specifically designed to harvest credit card information. They might even sell you a working Windows key just to make the transaction seem legitimate, but their real goal is to steal your payment data for future fraud. This is why using PayPal or a prepaid card is strongly recommended if you're going to buy from less established sellers. Now, if after hearing all of this, you still want to go the cheap key route, I'm going to tell you how to do it as safely as possible. First, stick with OEM or retail keys, never volume license keys. When you're shopping, look for listings that specifically say OEM or retail. Avoid any listing that mentions KMS, May-K, or volume. These are red flags that you're getting an organizational license that will likely get deactivated. Second, use a payment method with buyer protection. PayPal is ideal because you can file a dispute if the key doesn't work. Credit cards also offer chargeback protection. Avoid using debit cards that draw directly from your bank account, and definitely avoid cryptocurrency or wire transfers, which offer zero recourse if you get scammed. Third, buy from sellers with established reputations and verifiable reviews. Some of the more reputable sites in the cheap key space include Kingin, G2A, and CD Keys. These are marketplace platforms where individual sellers list their keys. The platforms themselves offer some buyer protection programs, though they usually cost extra. Look for sellers with thousands of positive reviews and high ratings. Read the negative reviews too to see what kinds of problems people have encountered. There are also smaller dedicated software key sites like Software Keep, SFT Key, My PC Key, Electronic First, CJS CD Keys, and Gamers Outlet. These are actual businesses rather than marketplaces, and they tend to have better customer service. They're often mentioned positively in tech forums. Prices typically range from $25 to $50 for Windows 11 Pro keys. Again, check reviews from multiple sources before buying. Look for sites that clearly state what type of key they're selling and offer some form of guarantee or replacement policy if the key doesn't work. Fourth, verify what type of key you're getting before you buy. Reputable sellers should clearly state whether the key is OEM or retail. If the listing doesn't specify, ask the seller directly before purchasing. Get their response in writing, either through the platform's messaging system or by email. This documentation can help if you need to dispute the transaction later. Fifth, keep all your documentation. Save your order confirmation, payment receipt, invoice, and any communication with the seller. Take screenshots of the product listing before you buy, showing the price and description. If you receive your key by email, save that email. If you need to dispute the transaction or prove you bought a legitimate key, this documentation is essential. Sixth, check the key immediately after receiving it. Don't wait days or weeks to try activating Windows. Test the key as soon as you get it so you can contact the seller right away if there's a problem. Most reputable sellers will replace a non-working key if you report it quickly. Seventh, always download Windows from Microsoft's official website, never from the key seller. Microsoft provides free downloads of Windows 11 installation media. You can create a bootable USB drive using their media creation tool. The key you buy separately is just for activation. There's never a legitimate reason to download Windows from a third-party source, and doing so puts your system security at risk. When you activate Windows, pay attention to what the system tells you. After entering your key, go to Settings, then System, then Activation. This will show you whether Windows is activated and what type of license you have. If it says Retail Channel, you have a retail key. You can also run the command slmgr/dlv in an administrator command prompt to see detailed license information. Some keys, particularly OEM keys, might require phone activation instead of automatic online activation. If Windows tells you to call Microsoft to activate, don't panic. This is a normal part of the activation process for some keys. You'll call an automated phone system, enter your installation ID using your phone keypad, and receive a confirmation ID to enter back into Windows. It's a bit tedious, but it works. Just be aware that the phone system might ask you some questions about how many computers this key has been installed on. Answer truthfully. Now let's talk about what happens if you decide you don't want to deal with any of this gray market uncertainty. What are your legitimate alternatives? Option 1 is to just pay the full price and buy directly from Microsoft. $199 for Windows 11 Pro isn't cheap, but you get a guaranteed legitimate retail license that you can transfer to future computers. You get direct support from Microsoft. There's zero risk of the key being invalid or getting deactivated. If peace of mind is worth $200 to you, this is the safest route. Option 2 is to check if you already have a Windows license you can use. If you previously bought a retail copy of Windows 10, you can upgrade that license to Windows 11 for free and it remains transferable. Check your old computers, email receipts, or Microsoft account to see if you have any existing licenses you've forgotten about. If you bought a laptop or desktop in the past few years that came with Windows, that's an OEM license tied to that specific machine and can't be transferred. But if you ever bought a standalone Windows license, you might be able to reuse it. Option 3 is to run Windows without activating it. This is completely legal. Microsoft allows you to download, install, and use Windows 11 without a product key. The operating system will work fully functional. You'll get all security updates. You can install programs and play games. The limitations are that you'll have a watermark in the corner of your screen saying Windows isn't activated. You can't personalize your desktop background or colors through the settings menu, though you can still do it through other methods, and you won't be eligible for Microsoft's official support. For many people, these limitations are completely acceptable. You can use Windows this way indefinitely, and if you eventually decide to buy a license, you can activate it at any time without reinstalling. Option 4 is to watch for sales from authorized retailers. Microsoft and authorized sellers like Amazon, Newegg, and Best Buy occasionally run promotions where you can get Windows keys at a discount. These sales are less frequent and the discounts are usually modest, maybe 20 or 30% off, but you're getting a guaranteed legitimate license. Sign up for price alerts or check deal aggregator sites to catch these sales when they happen. Option 5, if you're a student, is to check if your school offers free or discounted Windows licenses. Many universities have agreements with Microsoft that allow students to get Windows, Office, and other software for free or at heavily reduced prices through programs like Microsoft Azure DevTools for teaching or on the Hub. Check your school's IT department website or contact them to ask about software benefits for students. Let me address common questions. Can you get in legal trouble for using a cheap Windows key? In practice, individual users are almost never pursued legally. Microsoft can deactivate keys that violate terms of service, but you won't face criminal charges unless you knowingly participated in fraud. Do cheap keys contain viruses? The keys themselves are just codes. The risk is if sellers provide Windows installation files, which could be compromised. Always download Windows directly from Microsoft. Why doesn't Microsoft shut down gray market sites? Some keys being sold are technically legitimate products, just sold against terms of service. Microsoft benefits somewhat since people use Windows instead of pirating it completely. Are $5 keys legitimate? At that price, you're almost certainly getting a volume license or something questionable. Legitimate OEM keys cost $20 to $30 minimum. $5 keys might work initially, but will likely get deactivated. Can you upgrade from Home to Pro with a cheap key? Yes, but this typically only works with retail keys, not OEM keys meant for fresh installations. What about Windows 10 keys? Windows 11 and Windows 10 Pro use compatible licensing systems. Many Windows 10 Pro keys will activate Windows 11 Pro and vice versa. Microsoft made the Windows 11 upgrade free for legitimate Windows 10 license holders, and the activation mechanism remained compatible across versions. Let me give you some perspective from people who have actually gone through this process. On Reddit and tech forums, you'll find thousands of discussions about buying cheap Windows keys. The experiences are genuinely mixed. Some users report buying keys for $20 to $30 from sites like Kingen or SFTKey, activating Windows without any issues, and having their installations stay activated for years with no problems. These people often say it was absolutely worth the savings and they'd do it again. Others report buying keys that worked initially but then stopped working after a few months. Maybe they got a volume license that Microsoft eventually flagged, or maybe the seller sold the same key to multiple people and it got blacklisted. These users had to either buy another cheap key, gambling again, or give up and pay full price for a legitimate license. Some say if they'd just bought from Microsoft initially, they would have saved time and frustration. A smaller number report getting completely scammed, receiving keys that never worked at all or were obviously fake. These people often paid with payment methods that didn't offer protection, or they bought from sellers with no reputation or reviews. They lost their money with no recourse. There are also stories from the other end. People who work in IT or system building businesses say they've purchased hundreds of cheap OEM keys over the years for building customer computers, and the vast majority worked fine. They consider the occasional non-working key just a cost of doing business, since they're saving so much money overall compared to buying from Microsoft directly. So what's my final recommendation? If you want absolute certainty, zero risk, and full support, buy from Microsoft or an authorized retailer. Pay the full price, get a retail license, and never worry about it. This is the right choice if Windows stability and legitimacy is critical for your work, if you're not comfortable with any level of risk, or if $200 isn't a significant expense for you. If you're willing to accept some risk for significant savings, buying from established gray market sellers can work out fine. Focus on sites with strong reputations, extensive reviews, and buyer protection. Stick with OEM or retail keys, avoid volume licenses, use payment methods that offer dispute resolution, be prepared for the possibility that the key might not work or might get deactivated later, in which case you'll need to deal with customer service or buy another key. If money is extremely tight, consider running Windows unactivated. It's free, it's legal, and the limitations are minor for most users. You can always buy and activate a license later when you have the budget for it. Whatever route you choose, understand what you're getting into. The cheap Windows key market exists in a gray area where most of the keys are technically legitimate Microsoft products, but they're being sold in ways that violate licensing terms. You're unlikely to face any serious consequences, but there are no guarantees, and you might end up with a key that doesn't work or stops working. Make your decision based on your personal risk tolerance, budget, and how important Windows licensing legitimacy is to you. There's no universal right answer. For some people, saving $150 is absolutely worth the small risk of a key not working. For others, the peace of mind of a legitimate Microsoft license is worth every penny of the full price. One more thing about ethics. Some argue buying gray market keys supports piracy and takes revenue from Microsoft. Others say Microsoft is a trillion-dollar corporation making money primarily from enterprise, and individual pricing is arbitrary. Some point out Microsoft offers Windows free in many contexts already. I'm not here to tell you what to think, but these are the arguments that exist in the community. Let's also talk about what happens if things go wrong. Let's say you bought a cheap key, it worked for a while, and then Windows suddenly deactivated. What do? First, go back to the seller and explain the situation. If you bought from a marketplace with buyer protection, file a claim through their system. Provide your order information, screenshots showing that Windows is no longer activated, and any other relevant documentation. Reputable sellers will usually provide a replacement key in this situation. If the seller is unresponsive or refuses to help, and if you paid with PayPal or a credit card, initiate a dispute with your payment provider. You'll need to provide evidence that you didn't receive what you paid for. This is where having saved all your documentation becomes crucial. Payment provider disputes can take weeks to resolve, but you have a decent chance of getting your money back if you can prove the key didn't work as advertised. If all else fails, you're basically back to your original options. Buy another cheap key and roll the dice again, pay full price for a legitimate Microsoft license, or run Windows unactivated. It's frustrating, but it's the reality of the risk you take when buying from the gray market. Now, I want to be crystal clear about something. I'm not encouraging anyone to break the law or violate Microsoft's terms of service. I'm providing information about what options exist, what the risks are, and how people in the real world navigate this situation. What you do with that information is up to you. You're responsible for your own decisions and any consequences that come from them. If you're setting up a business computer or any system where licensing compliance is legally important, like in a regulated industry, do not mess around with gray market keys. Buy legitimate licenses from Microsoft or authorized resellers. The potential legal and professional consequences of being found to use improper licenses in a business context are way more serious than for an individual home user. Similarly, if you're building a computer for someone else, like a friend or family member, be very cautious about using gray market keys. If that key later gets deactivated, they're going to come back to you for help, and you'll be in an awkward position. It might be worth paying more for a legitimate key just to avoid potential future complications. Before I wrap up, let me give you the step-by-step process if you decide to go forward with buying a cheap Windows 11 Pro key. First, do your research on sellers. Check multiple review sites, Reddit threads, and tech forums. Look for recent reviews within the last few months, because seller reliability can change over time. Make a short list of 2 or 3 sellers that seem reputable. Second, verify what type of key is being sold. Read the product description carefully. If it doesn't specify OEM or retail, contact the seller before buying and ask directly. Avoid anything labeled volume, KMS, or MAKE. Third, choose your payment method carefully. Set up a PayPal account if you don't already have one, or use a credit card with good fraud protection. Avoid debit cards, cryptocurrency, or wire transfers. Fourth, make your purchase and immediately save all documentation. Screenshot the product page, save your receipt, and keep any emails. Fifth, download Windows 11 from Microsoft's official website. Do not use installation media from the key seller. Use Microsoft's media creation tool to create a bootable USB drive or ISO file. Sixth, install Windows 11 on your computer. During installation, it might ask for a product key, but you can click I don't have a product key and proceed. You can activate after Windows is installed. Seventh, once Windows is installed and you're at the desktop, go to Settings, then System, then Activation. Click Change Product Key and enter the key you purchased. Windows will attempt to activate online. If it succeeds, great. If it requires phone activation, follow the prompts to call Microsoft's automated system. Eighth, verify your activation status. In the activation settings, it should say, Windows is activated with a digital license. You can also run slmgr/dlv in an elevated command prompt to see detailed license information, including what type of license channel it is. Ninth, test your system for a few days, make sure everything is working properly, and Windows remains activated. If you encounter any problems, contact the seller immediately while the transaction is still recent. 10th, keep your documentation permanently. Even after successful activation, save your order information and product key in a secure location. If you ever need to reinstall Windows, you'll need that key again. That's the complete process. It's not overly complicated, but it does require careful attention and due diligence at each step. To summarize everything we've covered, Windows 11 Pro normally costs $199 from Microsoft. Cheap keys that cost $20 to $50 are widely available from gray market sellers. These keys can come from various sources, including regional pricing arbitrage, surplus OEM keys, MSDN keys, or misused volume licenses. Buying and using these keys typically doesn't violate any laws, but it may violate Microsoft's terms of service. The risks include keys not working, keys getting deactivated later, lack of support, and potential security issues if you download Windows from unofficial sources. If you choose to buy a cheap key, use reputable sellers with strong review histories, pay with protected payment methods, stick to OEM or retail keys, keep all documentation, and always download Windows from Microsoft. The ultimate decision comes down to your personal risk tolerance and whether saving potentially $150 is worth the uncertainty and lack of guarantees. There are legitimate alternatives, including paying full price for certainty, reusing an existing license if you have one, running Windows unactivated, which is free and legal, watching for authorized retailer sales, or getting student discounts if you're enrolled in school. At the end of the day, the cheap Windows key market exists because Microsoft's retail pricing creates substantial demand for alternatives. Whether this market is ethical is debatable, but it's undeniably real and widely used by millions. Millions worldwide run Windows on cheap gray market keys, and most never face any significant problems with activation or functionality. Microsoft knows this market exists. They could crack down harder if they wanted, but they generally don't, possibly because having people use Windows, even with questionable licenses, is better for their ecosystem than having people pirate Windows entirely or switch to Linux. You now have all the information you need to make an informed decision about how you want to get your Windows 11 Pro license. Whether you go the official route, take a chance on the gray market, or run unactivated, at least you understand what you're doing and what the potential consequences are. Just remember, there are no guarantees when buying outside official channels. You might get a great deal that works perfectly for years. You might get burned and waste your money on a key that stops working. That's the nature of the gray market. If you're okay with that uncertainty, it can save you a significant amount of money. If you're not okay with it, stick with official channels and sleep easy knowing your license is completely legitimate and supported. That's everything I've got for you on getting Windows 11 Pro keys for cheap without getting scammed. I hope this helped clarify the situation and gave you the information you needed to make the right choice for your situation. Thanks for watching, and good luck with your Windows installation, however you decide to do it.